Hello, everybody. Welcome along. And it's a happy new year for followers of the Premier League Check-In podcast. We are back after a break over Christmas. The great Matt SB is here, and we have a lot to talk about down at the bottom of the table, Matt. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the nice little 4-game chunk, which is the game before Christmas, and then the 3 quick rounds afterwards, and see where we stand on the relegation sandwich, and see if that kind of little form line is in any way revealing. I'm going to start you with Leicester City, who are bottom of the form on that little block of 4 games, 0 points. And that's 5 defeats on the trot after a new manager bounce. There's been a lot of changes down the bottom there. They got the quick little buzz of 4 points, didn't they? We did pick out, watch back the show, the amount of shots they were conceding, and we did perhaps see a little iceberg, but it's a 5-game losing streak iceberg, and it's 0 points in the 4 games. Leicester are bottom of our relegation sandwich form table, Matt.
Yeah, Leicester City have hit the iceberg and they're sending out the SOS signal. It's not great because, like you say, they had that bounce. And at the time, I think it was fair to say a lot of us thought, oh, here we go. They're starting to get a move on. Was it the right decision? But, it's better to judge it over a longer sample size. And we've got to this point now where it actually looks like they're more open. I mean, we knew that'd be the case, but we thought that they'd benefit from being better going forwards. Like we said, Was it four points in the first 2 games? I think there was the 4-0 defeat to Newcastle, which I thought you can get away with that if you get back to winning ways. And then the next game was Wolves, and that was a massive 6-pointer. And Wolves beat them 3-0 at Leicester. Since then, Leicester City have gone on to lose again and again. 3-1 against Liverpool. Okay, that's understandable. It's Liverpool. Man City 2-0. Also understandable, but Villa as well 2-1. You've got to try and pick off some points against some of the top teams. I'm not saying you have to beat them week in, week out, but you look at Ipswich, they beat Chelsea and they've come moving up a bit and they've taken a point off Fulham. We'll come on to Ipswich later, but you've got to try and take points against a couple of the teams in the top half. Otherwise, you just have to win the games against other bottom half teams. And Leicester City, as you say, bottom of the form table, way too open, Ben, conceding too many goals.
And the change, Matt, in the table is that Leicester had themselves a cushion. We're going to talk about Ipswich putting some points on. We're going to talk about Wolves putting on even more points. And now you have Southampton, Leicester, Ipswich. And I know we're talking about Leicester, but from the Ipswich point of view, it was first job, get above Leicester. So if you flip that round, Leicester are now below Ipswich as well, Matt.
They are. They've slipped beneath the waves. It's still very tight down there. Obviously, Wolves and Palace, who will come on to, have started to put some points together, but Everton have tripped up a few times, and it's still quite close. So if Leicester go and get a win in the next game, then they could suddenly they'd overtake Ipswich and certainly close the gap and possibly could come out of that bottom 3, sort of depends on the other results. So still a fighting chance, but 5 defeats in a row, Ben, is really concerning down there. Even Southampton have picked up more in their last 5 games. So got to get a result soon, Ben. Like I say, January could be crucial for any of these clubs, by the way. Will Leicester make a statement and bring in 1 or 2 players? We will see. But yeah, the form's not good.
So let's move on to Southampton. And I mean, you're right to say they have scored more points than Leicester in that little period, but it's slim pickings for the poor Saints fans. That obviously they made the managerial change. Thank you for everyone's patience in the comments. I think you could all see that we literally filmed seconds before Russ Martin got sacked, and we were already edited and ready to go. So we were guessing it was going to happen, and then it did happen. But sometimes football timelines and doing this, you just have to accept you're never going to be in front of it all of the time. So Ivan Juric comes in, and the new manager bounced for Southampton, and I'm not being disrespectful here, was a 0-0 draw against Fulham, right? And then it was straight back to defeats, 2 points from 10 games. I don't necessarily need to hear from you about the form on the pitch, Matt, because unless we see a mighty 180-degree flip, they're going to finish bottom and go down. What do you think about the managerial change? And we often judge these over Is it a 3-month Allardyce hit to, survive? Is it the 2-year play to go down, get promoted with the parachute payments, and then come back and stabilise? I don't know. I'm not exactly full of enthusiasm for Ivan Juric, although there's probably a little bit of bias because I'd never heard of him.
Yeah, I hadn't either, to be honest. It's an interesting one. I'm at a position, and I'm not trying to be all doom and gloom, but I think Southampton are very much gone. It takes something special. It's not mathematically impossible that they could survive, but I think what we've seen with them getting rid of Russell Martin, who we said would go down on his sword with his style of play, is that they are showing that they still think there's a way. You wouldn't change the manager if you thought we're still going to go down either way. So they're believing in Juric possibly getting them out. And as we said, they did pick up a 0-0, but it has to be wins. It has to be back-to-back wins. It needs to be 7 points in 3-4 games, really, to start bringing themselves back into it. I suppose you could say the style of football is changing. Not so many mistakes, playing it out from the back, but ultimately they're still losing games. Seem a little bit tighter defensively, but then they just lost 5-0 to Brentford, so that kind of blows that out of the water. But I meant in the 3 games before that. So
No, okay,
yeah, it's looking very bleak for Southampton, and I don't know. I mean, do you give Ivan Juric just to the end of the season now? Anyway, I mean, the negativity will still sort of be there, and it's just going to.
It's just
I don't
very
know.
hard, Matt. If he does go to the end of the season and the average result he's got is like a 3-0 defeat for most of his tenure, it's then hard to flip that back into winning, even if you do drop the level next season, isn't it?
Yeah, and I was just about to say that. That's a very good point, because even if they went down terribly and stuck with Russell Martin, you'd think going into next season, well, he's done that in the Championship before.
Yeah.
You could see them turning it around again. But you're right. He'll have had Juric will have had 20 games, maybe picked up 5 or 6 points, and then he goes into the Championship and he needs to get 90 points to get back up again. I know it's a different league, but it's difficult to see the negativity completely transform into positivity next season. But let's see. I think Southampton fans at this point would just be happy to have the slimmest chance, get a result in the next 2 games, and you might be able to close the gap a bit and at least have a fighting chance. But it looks very bleak.
Everton have put themselves in a fairly decent position. I mean, arguably they still are in a decent position because they're in 16th place, and that's when you look at the 4-point gap up to Crystal Palace. That's kind of as good as it's going to get for a lot of these teams down the bottom. But, and there is a mitigating factor to come at the end of this. They only scored 2 points in the 4 games. The big worry is they're not scoring any goals. 1 goal in the last 5. Matt, the mitigating factor, and we've done this a few times this season with levels of clubs, and we'll have the same conversation with Wolves in a minute. The fixtures were just so horrendous. It was Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City, Forest, and Bournemouth. So 3 of the elite, and then 2 of the upper middling who are playing really well this season. What have you got to say about Everton?
Yeah, I think you're right to highlight how difficult the games have been. They also would have played Liverpool in that time. So I know we'll look at the games played column and it'll be like, oh, Everton have got a game in hand. It's against Liverpool. So won't get too excited about that one. But I think they are playing all right. What I'm finding interesting, Ben, looking at the table is Everton are above the bottom 3. They've played 19 games, so that's half their games. And they're on 17 points. So they're projecting, if they did that again in the second half of the season, that they'd get to 34 points. And as I say, they're 16th. So in terms of the tide at the bottom, it's pointing towards a pretty low tide that maybe
Good.
33, 32, maybe 31 to survive. I mean, we've said over the last few years that the stronger the teams at the top get, the less points the teams at the bottom will get, and that tide will keep going down. So even though, if you look at your usual averages that you need 36 to stay up or something, I think Everton are going to be okay. But just got to be careful, I guess, because we can give them a pass for having difficult games. But when the fixtures open up a bit and they play any of the teams below them, if they lose those, then they do get pulled in. So walking a little bit of a tightrope, but not too concerned is what I will say, though.
The majority of the English footballing public who followed the Premier League and Everton will imagine when they're right up to their necks in it and they have a hard game at Goodison, they'll win, won't they? They always
Yeah.
always seem to. I just want to add on to your point about the top teams battering the bottom teams. What that's also done is meant that nobody's gone down on goal difference because the bottom teams have conceded so many goals that it's been so disparate that there's been 10, 20, 15 or whatever between certain teams. Whereas goal difference right now is actually an issue as we come on to Ipswich and Wolves because they are separated by goal difference. Now, talking about horrendous fixtures, Ipswich have got 4 points from 4. Now, yes, we understand 1 point per game is enough if you do it across the whole season. It obviously isn't enough if you don't win your first 13 games, essentially, and you're below it. We get that. But I think when you factor in for Ipswich, Matt, that these 4 games have been against Newcastle, where they took an absolute pasting, Arsenal away, where they took an absolute pasting, and then a win against Chelsea and a draw against Fulham. To claw that back to a point per game is, I think, really good. All emotional attachment aside, you'll call it fairer than I will in a minute. 12 points in 11 games, though, Matt. So you're asking me about longer sample sizes. I think the thing we've pointed out about Ipswich is they've picked up points in 10 of the games with the 7 draws. So they've dropped points in half of the games, essentially, for a team that's currently projecting to get relegated on goal difference. Also, Matt, we said Kieran McKenna would adapt and pivot. We're now seeing a back 5 and, Wolfenden come back in, and now Ben Godfrey has been signed as well. So there is a bit of a sense that there's a higher level of durability than there was in the first 2 months.
Yeah, I think Godfrey is an interesting signing, by the way, obviously with his former Norwich connections. Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Because Ipswich have had a difficult run. I think when we last spoke before Christmas, obviously that was 4 games ago. Was it Arsenal, Newcastle, Chelsea, then
I was
Fulham?
so depressed, mate. I would have bit your arm off for 4 points from that.
Right, yeah, to navigate through that, getting a point per game, and really could have been 6 points. Obviously fine margins right at the end against Fulham in that crazy game, which was basically a penalty shootout. But Ipswich are finding a way to get results, as you said. The adaptability, and they're at that point now. After beating Chelsea, had been flying. Where other than maybe Man City away and Liverpool away, I think Ipswich have got a chance in every game other than those. I mean, even at Arsenal away, lost 1-0, didn't create a lot, but the longer it
They were
stayed
still able
1-0,
to stick the
yeah,
ball in the box in stoppage time, weren't they? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. It was only 1-0, so you're always in the game. And I watched the final few minutes. Didn't really get any clear shots away, but if one of those crosses had just deflected off an Arsenal defender, you could have easily snatched a point out of that. I know that's hypothetically speaking, but it's about staying in the games, and then also how you lose as well, because at the moment it is fine margins between Ipswich and Wolves. I wonder if when we get to the later stages of the season in May, and Ipswich have say lost a game 1-0, but you look at your phone and you see Wolves have lost 2-0. You go, it's a good day's work. We've closed in on them by 1 goal difference. But that's how close it is. I mean, we'll come on to Wolves in a second. But interesting, really, because Ipswich are definitely the best performing team in that bottom 3. It's about who can you pull in. I wouldn't have thought it'd be Everton, but Everton are the team in the worst form. But as we highlighted, they've had the difficult games. Wolves had a resurgence, and we're going to come on to them in a second, aren't we, Ben? Because they just lost 3-0 to Forest, and I wonder if that sort of changes the trajectory that they were starting to get onto.
Yeah, great point. And if you believe in the new manager bounce, which does look quite real this season, we've had a lot of changes and a couple of, maybe a 6 points or a 4 points like at Leicester. Well, Wolves went bang, bang, didn't they? 7 points in the first 3 games. If the pattern with the other clubs is the same with Wolves, that'll be it then. And, it'll go back to, sporadic points here and there. But we've talked about the value of back-to-back wins, haven't we? And how, how important that could become what may. So Wolves, 1 goal on the goal difference ahead. I do want to flag up that the fixtures now are pretty minging, and then their March. It's worked out exactly the same as it was, where Wolves had it really, really hard, and then they had all of their rivals, didn't they? So you would almost say if Wolves are in touch or above the line by March, they're in really good position to survive because they play Everton, Southampton, West Ham, and Ipswich all in a row coming up to Easter. So it's absolute. But that obviously means, Matt, that prior to that, Newcastle away, Chelsea away, Arsenal and Villa home, Liverpool away, Bournemouth away, Fulham home, and then they go into that run. So I think for Wolves, it's ride out the new manager bounce, keep Cunha on the pitch as often as you can, because he obviously had the suspension issue, didn't he? And I think if they're in touch or above the line before March, they've got a great chance, haven't they?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I know they've changed the manager. There was a few weeks ago now, wasn't it? That was around the same time Russell Martin was replaced at Southampton as well. But either way, Wolves fans would have looked at those fixtures as this is the time to
I
make up
think
ground.
Pereira came in, Matt, for this run of 4. I think we're right with that, yeah.
Yes, yeah, literally just before these 4 games, and because they had a favourable, I think it was November, and December's not been too bad for Wolves as well. This was their chance to get moving, and if they couldn't even get their heads above that bottom 3 before the fixtures turn horrible again, then you'd be concerned. And they've just managed to do it, just risen up to 17th now, as we say, fine margins. It's goal difference separating them, but the fixtures are going to turn a little bit horrible, as we said, and there needs to be that sense of realism now from the Wolves fans that this might be where not so many points are accumulated. But let's see. I mean, imagine if they were to start taking points off the top half teams, and that really does show that they are coming away from the bottom 3 picture. But yeah, I agree with your narrative that I would imagine it might be a step backwards before maybe things step forwards again. But it gives Ipswich a chance, doesn't it? The way that the fixtures have opened up. It also gives Leicester a chance. And so close down there, really, really close that Wolves, I suppose they've got to say to themselves, we've brought Everton in. Can we keep Palace in as well? It's the more you can drag in, the more chance you've got of staying up. But no, credit to them for their recent resurgence. But the defeat to Forest was not a good one.
Yeah, so to round this out, we've had it at 5 with that 4-point gap, and you're almost having this ridiculous thought process, Matt, as an Ipswich fan, where Leicester play Palace in the next game, where you're almost saying, "Go on, Leicester, win that one. Just pull Palace a little bit further back in. We'd rather have more teams involved in here." But we've said for a while it looks like those 5, and right now, we are in the doomsday scenario of the 3 EFL teams from last year in the bottom 3, and we're in the doomsday scenario of it being done on goal difference as well, but it's all very tight. Get your thoughts in via the comments on the relegation sandwich. Now, Matt, we are both YouTubers, and YouTubers always get accused of over-egging the pudding and exaggerating, not underdoing it. Have we underdone it about Nottingham Forest, Matt? Because we've talked about them all season, and we discuss, right, how are we going to frame this? So Forest could finish in the top half. Oh, Forest are going to be in the top 8. Forest could be in the top 6. Could Forest qualify for Europe? Right now, the door is wide open for Nottingham Forest, who have 40 points in 20 games. So, I mean, we'll look at the numbers in a minute. They can be, I don't know, 6 out of 10 above average and get the total that would normally get you in the top 4 this season. Talk to me about the winning machine that is Nottingham Forest.
Absolutely astonishing. 40 points. So I think we could say they're probably staying up now, Ben. And
they could lose every game 3-0 and still stay up.
Do you know what as well, Ben? In 20 games of this season, they've picked up more points than they did in either of the last full seasons, which is incredible, because in the first season they got 38 points. Last season, did they get about 35? They did have a couple of points deducted. And 40 points from 20 games is obviously 2 points per game. So they're projecting 76. And I'd actually done the numbers. I know Ben did as well when we sent over the format for this. It's on average about 70 points to get 4th place. And there's also, I will highlight, there's also the possibility that 5th place could be getting Champions League football, depending on how the English teams perform in Europe this season. So the door is very wide open for Nottingham Forest. And for them to not make any kind of European football, considering that 6th place is usually about 60 points, I think would be very disappointing. So how many games left? 18 points. So If they were to draw every game, they'd still get 58 points, which would have them borderline 7th place. And that's drawing every game. They've won 6 in a row, Ben. It's astonishing, incredibly good defensively. And over the last 2 seasons, we'd highlighted they've got to make the City ground a fortress. Well, they've picked up 17 points at home, 23 on the road.
Sensational. Absolutely sensational. So, Matt, what are the big risk factors? I'm guessing you're probably going to say it's a combination of both, because you're looking at can Forest maintain? Look, they're probably not going to win 6 in a row again between now and the end of the season, but they don't need to do that, as we've just said. So, can Forest maintain in terms of squad and player overperformance? Maybe, and I mean that in the best possible way. This is the best example of an overperformance when you have Forest third in the Premier League in the new year. But what about the risk factors from elsewhere? Because Newcastle are in equally good form and have qualified for the Champions League before. Chelsea have slipped recently, but we know they're capable of literally smashing in 30 goals in about 7 games, aren't they? And Manchester City is 6th, and Manchester City can win 10 games in a row at any point with De Bruyne, Guardiola, Haaland, etc. Where are the main risk factors, Matt?
I think you've highlighted them. The teams, the amount of good teams suggests we could actually have a higher tide than usual for 4th place. So I know we've spoken about the averages, and 70 points should get you 4th. It's not a certainty. It could be you need 75, 76, because I agree with you. Man City, when they get going, and it does seem like recently they've just started to put things back together, they could go zooming. Newcastle, they're not in Europe this season, so they're going to put their heads down and go.
Mate, they battered Ipswich, honestly.
Yeah.
So much better.
Devastating going forwards, aren't they?
Yeah.
It was 4-0 against Ipswich, 4-0 against Leicester as well. Their goal difference is shooting up. Isak, Jacob Murphy, we've highlighted how good Newcastle are going forwards. And as I was just saying, they're not playing in Europe this season. So whereas Villa have that distraction, Newcastle don't. But even that said, Villa could suddenly get going again in the Premier League. Bournemouth are sort of in the equation as well. There's so many good teams in the top half of the Premier League that it's pushed Tottenham and Manchester United down into the bottom half, which is incredible. Got to talk about Forest's next game, Ben. Liverpool at home after the FA Cup weekend. If they win that, and they are the only team to have beaten Liverpool this season, they close the gap to 3 points.
Mate, if they beat Liverpool and do the double, then we reframe the conversation again, because they're in the blooming title race then, not the bloody Champions League race. Maybe a bit of a spoiler alert there for the mouthwatering matchup in next week's show, but that should be absolutely incredible. And we've been doing this at the bottom, and sometimes we feel a bit unfair, picking out runs of games, but Forest are just beating everybody. It's not soft fixtures, is it? They won at Man United, Villa, Brentford, Spurs, Everton, Wolves. So it's a fair mix all the way down the table. And as well, going to Brentford, for example, has been really hard this season. They just go there, keep the job done. Normal comments about clean sheets, 4 in a row now. And look, we're repeating ourselves here, but Forest just utterly incredible.
That's it, Ben. Though, like you say, Brentford were the best home team this season, and Forest went there and just got rid of that. They just went there, made it look routine. They're breaking records, aren't they? 6 wins in a row in the top flight. I don't know when they've ever done that before. They won at Liverpool for the first time but Brian Clough didn't even do that, I don't think. They won at Man United, winning away at Liverpool.
Oh god, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Man United away, they hadn't beaten them there in years. And like I say, they're still pretty good at home, but it's just how good they are away. Defensively, absolutely ridiculous. Clean sheet monsters.
Absolutely. Well, although they could learn a thing from Burnley, who are the real clean sheet monsters, as Matt and I discuss elsewhere on our channel. It's probably a good time to plug that in just a second. But first of all, please get your comments in. I know it's all fun and games to get excited if you're a Forest fan, but this does feel not like hyperbole, and that the door is just wide open for the Forest boys to really up the ante. And with my kind of dreamer's hat on, just send a big flag to everyone and say you can get promoted from the EFL and make the leap. And Aston Villa obviously have been in there. Newcastle, I know these are traditionally big clubs, but feels a bit different with Forest considering how long they were out of it for and how quickly they've managed to do it. Matt, what can people find over on the Matt SB channel, which you should go right now and subscribe to?
Thank you very much, Ben. More Premier League content, Championship content, and League One content, where myself and Ben go head-to-head in the predictions, which the scores are very close between us this season. Get involved. Lots more football content, so if you've not subscribed, please do.
Brilliant stuff. Great to speak to you again, Matt. Great to have the Premier League Check-In podcast back. Thank you for the people who were checking in on the Premier League Check-In. Where's Matt? Where is he? We need this back. We're back and we'll be running this through to the end of the season. And you are a vital part of this watching. Please get your views in via the comments. We really, really want to hear from Southampton fans, from Leicester fans, Ipswich, Wolves, Everton down at the bottom. Palace maybe, or maybe in a couple of weeks. I don't know. And we really want to hear from Forest fans about this absurd season. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And we'll see you again next week for another Premier League Check-In podcast.